And the beauty of cannabis is it's very flexible. You can make it work for you by changing the dose, the timing, the cannabinoid, the product. It's one of the most flexible medicines I think we'll ever come across. And the beauty of it is it doesn't harm you.
Hola, soy el Dr. Max Alzamora y les doy la bienvenida a Sinergia, este podcast en el que busco entrevistar a personas que vienen contribuyendo alrededor del mundo al desarrollo del cannabis. En esta oportunidad tenemos una persona muy especial para mí, ella es la doctora Bonnie Goldstein. Recuerdo que la primera vez que escuché de ella fue por el documental With the People, donde ella trataba a niños con temas oncológicos y el fin era darles calidad de vida, pero se llegó a mucho más. Y desde ahí no he parado de seguirla y encontrarme con ella. La hemos podido tener vía virtual en conferencias en Perú, así que estoy muy emocionado de que esté con nosotros. Really appreciate that you accept my invitation for this podcast. Let's start. No? How did you become interested in the use of cannabis as medicine?
Well, so I was working as a pediatric emergency medicine doctor. I was burned out. I had a small son at home. I'm working at night. It was a bit of a mess, very stressed out and sleep deprived. And during that time, a friend of mine with cancer asked me about medical cannabis. And this was in 2008. I didn't know anything. And I started to look into the scientific research, and I found many reports about the endocannabinoid system, about cannabis that kills cancer. Cannabis helps with appetite, it helps with sleep, it helps with anxiety. And even though there was a lot of stigma, I was intrigued as a scientist. And so I started doing more and more research, and I knew I didn't want to go back to the emergency room. And so I answered an ad to work at an office where they gave people medical cannabis approvals. And when I tell you I started off not knowing anything, just what I read, but I learned. And I listened to the people that were coming into that office. And almost all of them are saying, cannabis helps me sleep, cannabis helps me work, cannabis helps me get off other medicine. It was amazing. And I was just fell in love with the practice of helping people in a natural way.
Who were your first patients? Cancer patients, or you have another kind of patients at the beginning?
All right, so it's a great question. So this is, when I started, it was already 12 years after California had passed the laws about medical cannabis. So I was seeing all adults, even though I was a pediatrician. I had to relearn adult medicine. But I will tell you that the top 3 diagnoses, which I would say is still pretty common: insomnia, anxiety, and chronic pain. And you know, they all run together. So cannabis is very good at treating these things. It's not curing, but it's helping people manage. And when you have an effective medicine that doesn't give you side effects to manage these things, it just makes quality of life better.
What does the documentary With the People means to you?
So I was approached by a parent of a little girl with a brain tumor who was involved in a documentary called With the People. And I met with the producers, and they asked me to participate. So they followed me for about, I want to say, somewhere between 2 and 3 years, followed me to conference and so on. It was amazing because it got the word out, especially for the sickest, most vulnerable pediatric patients, the cancer kids who are suffering from not just the cancer, but from the treatment of cancer. And one of the things that, you know, we don't get to say 100% very much in medicine, as you know, but I will say that in my experience, almost 100% of patients with cancer respond to some cannabis. It's amazing what it can do for them. And luckily, studies are now showing that.
When the documentary was filmed, 2016.
I believe the documentary was filmed, I want to say 2015, 2016, and then it was released around that time. Yeah, I think so, yeah. Before COVID, I don't remember the year.
How did you decide to write a book?
That's a great question too. So I had a patient that was what I would say cannabis curious. He read things online. It was a young man with renal failure, kidney failure. He was on dialysis, and he found that the dialysis really, the day before he felt terrible, the day of dialysis he felt terrible, because it's a very non-natural way to, clear the toxins. So you build the toxins and then they all go out the same time. He just never felt good. The cannabis helped him. He was in my office one day, and I always give my patients a fair amount of time, and we were talking, and he was asking me questions, and luckily I knew to answer them. I knew the answers. And you know what he said to me? Doctor, I think you should write a book so that all of the questions I have will be answered in the book. And I walked out of my office that day and I said, I'm going to write a book.
And the idea to make it in Spanish?
Well, once I wrote it in English, I was hoping that it would be translated to every language, because I think globally, people we're even in California, we have restrictions still, even though it's open now, but there's so many people globally that can benefit. And if they can't find the information because they don't speak English, it has to be available in their language. So far it's in Spanish, Czech, and then the UK has even though it's English, it's a special UK. And then I just got a deal with, believe it or not, Lithuania.
Because now you have two versions of the book, no?
Right. So Cannabis Revealed was my first book that I self-published. And that book, boy, that was like giving birth. That was really hard for me because I didn't know what I was doing, but I just put it all on paper, and I had everybody in my family, all my friends, I said, everybody has to read it and give me feedback. So I self-published that, and then that was published in December of 2016. And remember now that cannabis is becoming less controversial, the way I say it. Now, I don't want to say more popular, but less controversial, especially medical cannabis. What ended up happening was the science that's coming out in the scientific literature, all the research studies, they're coming out very fast. And my book was, in like 2019, the book was missing information. And then I got a call from the publisher who said, we'd like to acquire your book. Will you, let's publish it. And I said, no, we're going to rewrite it. So I will tell you about 75% rewritten. I mean, the stuff on the endocannabinoid system, that's kind of the same.
Yeah.
Right? And the plant is a little the same, but really how these compounds work, the conditions for which we can now say we have scientific evidence, that all expanded quite greatly.
Okay. How do you see the future of cannabis as medicine?
Well, I'm going to be very optimistic because in my 15 years doing this, I have seen it go from hidden people buying it, discreetly or not telling anybody, not telling their doctors, keeping it a secret. And what I'm seeing now in 2023, just this explosion of physicians coming to it, of patients thinking about it, loved ones. We can no longer deny the science. It's irrefutable that we have an endocannabinoid system, that cannabis interacts, and that for the most part it is safe and well tolerated. What I want to see for the future is for patients to have clinicians that are knowledgeable, for them to have access to clean, tested medicine, and then on the research side, let's figure out what it does, what indications are best, what doesn't it do, what doses would be helpful, can we cure cancer with it? All of these many questions that are still unanswered.
Okay. We know that it's not only THC and CBD.
Right.
Which cannabinoids do you see as promising?
Right. So when I first started my practice, it was THC only. That's all that was available. Either you liked it and it helped you or you didn't. Okay, that's it. Then we had CBD, which expanded who we could treat, treating children with epilepsy and autism, promoting the synergy between the THC and CBD. Now we have CBG. CBG stands for cannabigerol. It is a compound that appears to have a plethora of effects, including anti-anxiety, antidepressant. It's anti-inflammatory. It has anti-cancer properties. It has some benefits for metabolic, neuroinflammation, again, a wide spectrum. And I am finding some nice results with CBG, very few side effects. CBG, interestingly, appears to be a bridge between THC and CBD. There are now a couple of reports on that. Some research that I'm doing on autism, where we collected salivary biomarkers. We had our study on children with autism and looking at how cannabis impacts those chemical pathways in their body. We took our data and we put it in with machine learning, and we found CBG sitting on its effects right between THC and CBD, like the other researchers. So it appears to be that bridge. What I like about it is it's non-intoxicating, but you don't need as high doses. So it's a nice combination and synergy with these other compounds. We also have CBDV, cannabidivarin. Cannabidivarin I've been giving just the past year to patients with autism, epilepsy, and some of my chronic pain patients. No question that it has benefits in these indications, probably more that we don't know of yet. And then CBN, cannabinol. This one is a funny one because it has, let's say it again, it has the this kind of myth that it is for sleep. In my patients, that's not what they're reporting. But in children with autism, it tends to be calming. Some adults report that it helps with, not as potent as THC, but can have a similar anti-anxiety effect in some people who are very sensitive to THC. It's kind of like a light version of THC. And then I also use THCA and CBDA, which are the acid cannabinoids. And I find that especially CBDA works very well for arthritis. It's a very nice anti-inflammatory. I've used CBDA in occasional patients for nausea and have seen at low doses some benefits, not in everybody, but in some. THCA is interesting because it always has a little THC in it. So when somebody reports some benefits, you always wonder, is it this THCA or is it THC? But I find that some of my patients with autism do very well with THCA. I also have a couple of patients that I spoke of at a conference in June. These THCA is anticonvulsant, and I have a couple of patients who did not do well on CBD. This gives them another option to use a different cannabinoid.
Some final words for people in Latin America, especially in Peru.
So what I would say to people really around the world is that this whole concept of cannabis being bad, the stigma, the propaganda, that's what it was. It was propaganda. Now, of course, I tell people, if you're going to use cannabis, use it responsibly. If you have a medical problem, try to find a physician or a clinician to help you, because you may miss some of the nuances if you don't know about it. I've been deep in 15 years. I still don't know everything, but don't be afraid of it. One thing we know, and I'm sure you can attest because I know you read the studies as well, almost every single study on cannabis for medical conditions reports safe and well tolerated. And the beauty of cannabis is it's very flexible. You can make it work for you by changing the dose, the timing, the cannabinoid, the product. It's one of the most flexible medicines I think we'll ever come across. And the beauty of it is it doesn't harm you.
Thank you, Dr. Bonnie. We hope to have you soon in Peru. No? I have some present for you.
Oh,
You're
so kind.
This is a notebook from the last conference in
Peru.
Peru.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, the lanyard
Oh, thank you. So colorful.
And
I
this
love it.
is Condor Cana, is my vape brand.
Oh,
no?
very nice.
It's a full spectrum CBD, no, and it's made with a lot of love for my patients.
Thank you. Look at that. Beautiful. Thank you so much. You're so
Thank you,
lovely.
Dr. Bonnie.
Thank you.
So, estamos desde la UCLA, UCLA, es la universidad donde se está dando la conferencia, la primera conferencia de la SEC, así que vamos a seguir con más podcasts y feliz de haber tenido a la doctora Bonnie, que es una inspiración para mí, así que muy agradecido, doctora Bonnie.
Thank you.
Como le dije, espero tenerla pronto en Perú porque sé que necesitamos que usted vaya y abra un poco las mentes de estos médicos que ya tienen un poco de interés, pero necesitan que doctoras como usted con experiencia pues les abra un poco más la mente y se sientan confiados de comenzar a darle calidad de vida a sus pacientes con este tipo de tratamientos naturales. Gracias, nos vemos.
Gracias.